Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to today's webinar, the first in the Navigating Turbulent Times series of 2026. So I can say Happy New Year. This one will be covering information management for facilities managers. We have a quite packed and informative session today. They'll be covering the guidance that we released just before Christmas and really bringing that to life to talk through what it means. Common challenges that we all face, certainly I've faced in workplaces I've worked in and for in the past, are fragmentation. Lots of different tech platforms with limited integration, over reliance on particular vendors and proprietary formats, systems being rolled out but poorly adopted, and a short-term focus, tools really meeting that immediate need rather than that long-term use case. I'm sure folks on the call will have that resonating with them, and these are some of the challenges that the guidance seeks to address alongside setting up processes and, more importantly, the people that will bring that technology to life and add that value. I'm Andrew Gladstone Heighton. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the head of policy and research here at IWFM. Um, we'll be meeting our panel in just a moment. A really exciting panel, actually. Both the author of the guidance and colleagues who fed into that, and some really great insight from facilities management in the tech sector. So, without any further ado, I will introduce us to our panel. So, Melanie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Melanie Robinson, associate with Okana. I lead our strategic advisory service focusing on digital transformation, and I'm a keen advocate for all things information-led initiatives.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melanie. Paul, could you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon. Paul Waddy. I'm a co-founder of White Frog, which is a publisher of training material for IAM. I'm also more relevant today, Vice Chair for Upskilling and Education at NEMA, which is the Institute for Information Managers in the Built Environment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul. And last but by no means least, Gordon. Gordon, could you introduce yourself, please?
Afternoon, everyone. Gordon Mitchell. I am co-founder of Holus, which is a AI, IM, FM integrative studio. I'm also the chair of the Technology Special Interest Group with IWFM. As Andrew alluded to, I was the author of the guidance and work also with NEMA and the Digital Maturity Framework, and I'm convener with ISO for standards and the same with BSI. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Colleagues, that's our panel for today. The way today's going to work is we're going to, in a moment, hear from Gordon about why information management matters, and then from Paul talking about the FM persona and the skills and training around that. And then we'll move into a panel discussion where we'll really get into the bones of the conversation. Should you want to contribute to that panel, or ask a question, the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen, it's just to the right of the green of the raise hand button there. Please enter your questions in that Q&A box, and I have a couple of colleagues on the call, Robin and Winner, who will be looking through those questions and ensuring we cover them. If we don't cover them today in the fantastic event that we have so many questions we can't get through them all, we will endeavour to follow them up alongside with a follow-up email and recording of the webinar. So, without any further ado, Gordon, over to you to talk through why information management matters. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Gordon.
Thanks, Andrew. So when we were reviewing the guidance, clearly that there was a requirement to think through, the overall structure and what we were trying to achieve, as is normal with these kind of activities. But the real, I guess, backbone of the endeavor was, I guess, born a little out of the Building Safety Act. We've got legislative requirements on our sector now. People start to pay attention when things like jail gets put on the table. But also, if you want to come from the completely opposite side, if information in essence is an organization's lifeblood, then FM and its horizontal kind of position across the organization's information can really kind of reimagine itself to an extent. We all know that the common and I would say misconception of facility management is that it's a cost center. But how can we start to become information custodians for our organizations and move to being much more of a value partner, completely flipping the narrative and really putting FM squarely in the boardroom. So if that was the kind of from the bottom up, let's make sure our people are armed so they don't have to face the predicament of anything like jail. And from the top down, start to really elevate facility management up the value chain. That was the broad brush concept. And then it was a case of, well, how? You can't eat the elephant in in one bite. So this is where we came to this five-layer model, which basically lets us democratize our information landscape and start to eat one bite at a time. And that aligns to a lot of the British standards work. So it also gives our sector a bit of commonality in how we approach things and think about things. So that spreads from the people layer, process layer, data layer, technology layer, all the way up into that context piece. So sometimes, when you're trying to deal with information at an organizational level, particularly at scale, these disaggregated aspects allow you to have much more insight and much more control. And in this way, hopefully the guidance starts to let facility managers and directors really talk the language of the boardroom, really start to move from things like the narrative of we provide catering services to moving more to dietary well-being and things that enhance productivity and performance. And these are the kind of things that get CFOs' ears pricking up rather than them hiding from you for your or hunting you down indeed for your next budget cut. So Andrew, that was the kind of broad concept of what we've tried to do, and hopefully we can unpack a little bit more of the detail and answer questions as they arise throughout the rest of today's session.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I think that's really set the foundations here. What's striking as a relative newcomer to the facilities management sector, and certainly as someone whose knowledge of information management can be best described as several spreadsheets all over the place, is how much of this process is people-led, how much it is around change management, people management, and cultural transformation. And that's where this five layer model and the matrix that is in the document that we will link to at the end of the webinar shows how this shows both the application and the purpose of each of these layers and how it aligns to international best practice. So I think that's certainly in the information management and the tech sphere when workers are feeling perhaps pressured or intimidated by automation, by machine learning replacing their jobs. It's just really foregrounds how important people are throughout this process. And as Gordon has highlighted, in keeping them compliant, safe, and preferably out of jail. Moving on, Paul, if you could share your screen, please. I know we have a couple of slides from you talking through the FM persona and the people aspect of that. So over to you.
All right. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, what I wanted to run briefly through today was just to give you an insight into what we're planning as far as NEMA is concerned, as far as my remit for upskilling and education. We've got ambitious plans to sort of try and step up, really. I think that aside from a few guides and a few sort of training provisions that have come out in the past, I think NEMA's always taken a bit of a back step in terms of leading the education and upskilling front. So in taking this role on, I'm kind of changing that and looking to sort of really push the boundaries. And what that's meant really is a good look at the landscape in terms of where people go to learn, where people pick up information, and understand where I can help, where NEMA can help to fill some of those gaps, bridge some of those gaps. So on an academic front, we're relaunching something called a BIM Academic Forum, which brings different education providers together to discuss ways of working, to discuss ideas, share materials, look at best practice, etc., and also to form um, what I would call feeder networks so that we can actually focus on the learning pathways that are available to the individual. And if we follow an individual that expresses an interest in joining our sector, that we do so we can support them from schools all the way through the system without having too many gaps or too much miscommunication in terms of what this all means. Obviously, we're talking from a digital perspective, so I'm not saying that I'm going to take over the education process for every sort of profession. It's just focusing on the IM aspects of those requirements. And what I want to be able to do is to be able to share a framework with you today that shows how we can build tailored career roadmaps for each individual. And these roadmaps are not based upon one static identity, which I think has always been the problem, as we've in a lot of the trainings available today. Too often, if you go out and you say, "I would like to get some training on BIM, on IM," then the answer is, "Okay, come in. Let's talk about ISO 19650 Part 2." Which is not relevant to a lot of people. It's not relevant to manufacturers. It's not relevant to the the legals and the subcontractors and so on and so forth. And it certainly isn't relevant to you guys on the FM side. So I want to start reframing the question and start asking for peer review of what skills, what responsibilities are actually applicable to the different professions. And then we can gauge whether people know what they should know based upon what they do and not against a static position. And the same is true when we look at the supply chain assessment. 19650 as a workflow tells us that we should be assessing the supply chain capability and capacity. But how can we do that if we're judging everybody against the same marker, the same benchmark? We really should be looking at the kind of requirements of that profession if we're going to understand whether they are capable or not. And so one of the key things that's happening is that we're building a master list of all of the competencies, all of the deliverables and the actions that are on the IM workflow lifecycle, and we are assigning those to a master list, which takes on board all of the different standards that we're looking at. This particular version I'm looking at here, as you can see, 19650 parts 2, 3, 5, and 41001. So we've got to start, but we're gathering groups of experts together to make sure that we incorporate the perspective of as many different personas as we possibly can, and putting them in a loose timeline so that we can assign responsibility, who's contributing to various actions and outcomes, and from that master list we can do all sorts of things. So as well as being a guidance to somebody that's learning the whole process, which, to be honest, is not going to be many people. There's a reason why this sort of list has never been compiled to date, and that is that no one person needs to look at the entire process. But what we can do once we've got that master list is we can start to filter it. And we can break it down and we can assign responsibility to the different professions, but we can also look at how that progresses through somebody's career. So that if you start off at the lower echelons of a particular profession, you will need to know certain skills and you'll be responsible for certain actions. But as you build through your career, the responsibilities will grow, and hence you need to learn more. So if we're putting together a course for a particular group of people or a particular individual, then the syllabus can be defined by filtering this list again and again until we come up with actual courses that are tailored to the audience. And we can use that same information to as well as to build courses. We can use it to look at the required capability and capacity of individuals and of organizations that are in our supply chain. It's possible that IWFM and other organizations like it might use this sort of method to gauge what a minimum requirement might be for members in terms of their IM capability. So the way that happens is that we look at that master list and we work out which of those responsibilities are applicable to the individual that we're talking about, or to the company that we're looking to hire, and we can assess what skill is likely to be and what grade we require for that particular skill. That gives us a knowledge shape. That gives us an idea in a visual form, but also obviously in a data format in the background. Gives us an idea of what we are expecting to see to meet our requirements. And we can then look at individuals or companies and get them to assess where they stand in relation to our requirements. So if the blue line represents let's say that we take IWFM as an example. If the blue line represents the minimum standard required of an IWFM member in relation to IM capabilities, then the grey might represent the score of somebody who has self-assessed or has looked at qualifications, looked at their team, whatever it happens to be, and has come back and said, our capabilities stand at this. So in this case, we've got a 75% match. We can use that method to actually compare different candidates, to compare people, to see how well people match up to the requirements, what the best fit might be, and we can move forward. And so we look at something like this, we can see that we've got different scores for these 3 different candidates here. But again, coming back to what I was saying earlier, this is not about comparing everybody to the same requirement. It's about tailoring the requirements and tailoring the response. It's a question and answer scenario. So in fact, rather than the 3 that we see here in different levels of capability, actually, if we compare those 3 people to what they should know, we've got 3 different knowledge requirements and 3 different responses. And the candidate 3, who was showing us 44% against 1 knowledge shape, actually knows far more than they need to in relation to what they actually do. And this is really the nub of the issue. Equally, that same scoring might actually refer to 1 candidate, because it's, as I say, it's a question and answer response. So there might be 3 different questions from 3 different jobs, 3 different sort of requirements from different organizations. And so you're comparing your responses of what you know compared to what the questions are. So we might have the same person with 3 completely different knowledge shapes, depending upon the questions that are asked. And then we start to see where things fit from there. So in conclusion, the intention is to be able to build this master list and use that data in order to answer an awful lot of questions. It allows us to build curricula that are tailored. It allows us to look at how we might assess capability and capacity in the supply chain. And that, to me, is the big one. So the bottom right-hand corner here, we can see that we're not looking at a straight line. We are looking at being able to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges and see where we stand in relation to what people should know. Very finally, I've got one last thing, which is to say that this is a slightly aside, but something that one of my colleagues raised with me earlier, which is a call for action really for you, and it is relevant. But there's a project called Falcon, which has just come out, a feasibility study, Innovate funded project, and it is designed specifically for FM. It is designed to educate FM people on AI and in particular to look at the assessing the legal and ethical implications of using AI in the workplace. And it's in beta testing and looking for feedback. So they are looking for people to sign up and to test the system and come back with any considerations. So that's just one little final thing I wanted to add on the end. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Paul. If I could invite our panelists to turn on their cameras now. We're moving into the panel discussion section of today's session. I would invite attendees to the webinar. Should you have any questions for a particular member of the panel or the panel in general, please do enter it in the Q&A field on the bottom sort of right-hand side of your Zoom interface there, and we will go through those questions as they come in. Using chair's prerogative whilst folks have their thinking caps on and just typing in those questions. Kind of related to Paul's point there around sort of AI adoption and to Gordon's presentation as well. And I'd like to ask you, Melanie, first, if I may. What are sort of the common misconceptions you encounter about information management in WFM? And how does this approach help, or any approaches you've encountered help address those? Thank you.
Sure. So I think where we've typically gone wrong, or at least been led astray a little bit, is relying on the tools to give us everything we need and not actually take a step back and understand our information maturity, which speaks quite nicely to both the presentations that have just gone before, because there's a whole realm of things that we need to consider when it comes to information maturity and how we are asking for information, procuring that information, and then ultimately managing it as well. And I think that's been brilliant to see through the guidance, is that shift away from a technology-led perspective. But I think what we need to really focus on as an industry is how we move away from models with technology which tie you in and ultimately make it really difficult. And what we're seeing with AI at the moment is it's really easy to keep bolting on tools and softwares to an already quite comprehensive software stack. So it's how we kind of untangle that, make sure we're not just spending money for the sake of spending money and being reactive to what's coming out, and actually taking that strategic view as to what we need, whilst also simultaneously challenging vendors on that licensing model to appreciate it's not advantageous to them, but it would hopefully help clients actually critique why they're using the software they're using.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Yeah, I mean, increasingly in a software as a service world with subscription models, it's increasing to push back on that. Gordon, do you have any experience or tips about how you can escape the walled gardens of certain proprietary ways of doing things and create a more system agnostic approach?
I mean, it's like anything, even like, building a house. You don't start with your roof. So in essence, for FM, we've typically not ever really got the foundations properly nailed yet. We deal with such diverse and vast arrays of data. I get that it's difficult, but we seen in Facilitate, the latest edition, there was the 10 years of BIM, and one of the consultants' viewpoint in that was, and he's at the very end of his career. Used to be in my technology special interest group, Mike Packham, and he commented that till up until even today in his career, he's hardly ever seen BIM being used in FM contracts. So I'm I'm hesitant to say the term BIM when we're talking about IM because it's not all about the building information kind of piece for FM. And I guess that's been part of our challenge. You know, the sector's built the information infrastructure left to right, and we're at the far end of that spectrum. So the last to be considered or thought about, if we actually could redo it, the whole thing should have been built right to left. And therefore we would have been the first considerations, and ultimately we would then be designing for outcomes in a way that we simply aren't at the moment. In saying all of that, that's in essence what the digital maturity framework that I'm project lead for with NEMA, and it's going into a consultative stage at the moment. The whole idea of that is to look at the roadmap, the running order. Let's not put digital twins and AI into your operation when you've not got a common naming convention, for example. How trustworthy is your asset register? If the answer to these things are no, there's probably other things that are more effective to do first. So, I guess as a wrap up to that, I would say think big, start small, scale fast. That's the kind of mantra that I use. If you get those foundations right, if you can trust your information and subsequently your data, then you can build to the stars. But that's the word I would use, trust the foundations. And if the answer is I'm not sure even, then, dig a bit deeper.
Thank you, Gordon. Paul, just reflecting on that building that strong foundations, getting the basics right. As you say, when you're taking a slice through the business and seeing the levels of skills and knowledge within an organization, do you see often very much that kind of focus on the next big shiny thing rather than that focus on the fundamentals, or is it very much a mixed picture? Apologies, Paul, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, apologies. I think that's always been one of the big issues in this sector is that the next shiny thing is too appealing. And people have this opinion that because they are, bright, intelligent people, they'll be able to work it out. When you only really know to ask the questions if you know what the questions are. And so sometimes when you're changing from one piece of software to another, then it might be true if you're sticking with all of your existing processes that you can work it out, you can learn, you can teach yourself. But if the whole point is to use a piece of software in order to enable a whole new methodology change, then that's not something you can sort of self-teach easily. And as I say, this is something. I mean, coming from somebody who I was one of the original founding people that worked with the Revit Corporation, and I then joined Autodesk, and so I guess you could say I'm part of the problem in some respects. But it's always been something that I'm fighting against, is this idea that we're not just trying to change the software. This is about the process. And until we understand that, and until we engage with the right people and ask the right questions, we're just playing at it. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking to FM or you're talking to, the architects and engineers that supposedly lead this whole process. That a lot of them it's just noise. It's until they're just not asking the right people. And we almost, to Gordon's point, almost have to start again and rebuild this whole thing around asking the right questions.
Fantastic, great response, Paul. Yeah, I think the guidance is very much helping shape those informed questions. And speaking of questions, one that has come in is about Project Falcon and engaging with that. Paul, would that be for that person to reach out to yourself or NEMA colleagues to be able to
Yeah,
facilitate that?
yeah, no, reach out to myself, and I can put you in touch with the team that are doing that. Yeah, I think my understanding is the more the merrier. So anybody
Fantastic.
interested in that,
We
perhaps you
have
can
questions.
put my
Sorry.
details on the chat so they can get through to me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul, for that offer. Questions are coming in now, and just a reminder, folks, to add them in that little Q&A box there. We have a question here that's saying, yes, how can we focus data and information that lends itself to efficiency deliverables? This person says too often in their experience, did and again, stop me if you've heard this before. They experienced digitalization initiatives far and wide and gathered an enormous volume of data, but then not understand how it to use it and unlock the benefits that, that data was supposed to use, almost kind of being blinded, not seeing the forest for the trees because of the wealth of that. So that really is a question of how can we focus on those efficiency deliverables? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Yes, please, if you don't mind. Um, I think it's a great question. And the obvious, I say the obvious, but the obvious answer is having definitely a coordinated leadership approach to information. Information needs to be a strategic asset in its own right, just as you would treat everything else that you own within an organization. Information is also something you own that needs nurturing and maintenance and care for it. The approach that I typically take with my clients is doing a bit of an asset register, but an information asset register. So what data have you got, and what data, how does that exist? What is the granularity of it? Is it reliable? Is it accurate, etc.? Going down a bit of a quality assurance list. And then we frame it around what we call efficiency decisions. So that's probably a bit of a strategic advisory term there, but the long and the short of it is really looking at why you want to do anything that drives efficiency, and what does that efficiency look like. So, for example, how can we reduce reactive maintenance, or how can we optimize space, etc. And then you reconcile those efficiency decisions and what you need for them with what data you've got or what data you've got access to, and take it from there. So, for example, if you've got access to data but it's not up to date, or you think there's gaps, then let's put an initiative in place to fill those gaps and get it in a healthy position. If we don't have that data, again, similar, how do we procure that data to an appropriate level of detail? And then ultimately, off the back of that is, where are we collecting data that's also not fulfilling any reason whatsoever? And I think people forget about that bit, is actually, there's sustainability implications with that. There's storage implications with that. So it is a bit of a spring clean, if you will. But I take it from those two perspectives of develop an information asset register and take that strategic, coordinated, leadership oriented view and define your efficiency decisions.
I guess at the beginning of the year, it's a good idea to think of those spring cleaning, those d data sets that you've never been used that are nice to have. Gordon, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think the thing with data is sometimes it's more important to know what you don't have than what you do. And if I'm talking about this at events or situations like this, in the 1970s we had a wonder material for the built environment and it was called such. And when you got all the data about it, it's called asbestos. You realized it wasn't so wonderful. So you need to. I also liken, every estate's its own. So there's not a one size fits all piece that a silver bullet that just works for everybody. So it's really important for you to assess where you are, where you specifically are. That's your assets, your people, all those five pieces of the what's in the guidance. Because if you think of any map, any geolocation you may find yourself in, going north isn't always the right solution. Because if going north takes you off the edge of a cliff, then maybe south's the right way to go north. So it's really, really important for you to get we talked about maturity earlier on, but also that kind of very pragmatic assessment of where you currently are. And more often than not, you probably will need to take a few steps back to go forward. But that what you're aiming to do is map in those strategic goals into all of your information infrastructure to then move into very much a sustainable change program. Because if you can't sustain it, then you haven't understood where you are. So that's I think it's just, sometimes it's not very attractive, the stuff you have to do. I mean, going and doing, an asset survey. I mean, it's not what we get out of bed singing and dancing about, is it? But particularly in the world of AI, and this is one what I'll wrap up on is, BIM when you got it, and if you didn't have the right data, it didn't really work. AI does. It will bridge gaps. It will create hidden pockets of risk that something like BIM simply wouldn't do. So your fragmented, untrustworthy data in BIM world meant lack of ROI. In AI world means, multi-headed Hydra waiting around the corner kind of idea.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gordon. Paul, if I could come to you, there's a question here from an attendee, and just a reminder, folks, questions are coming in. Would try and get through them, but do ask in that Q&A box. What approaches have you seen work best to embed the people there, particularly around role clarity and accountability, and really kind of embedding information maturity as a cultural norm, as a business norm, rather than just being a system-led initiative, so it becomes BAU effectively.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a cultural shift that's required in academia, which sort of talking to my remit really, we do need to engage with those that are providing our new recruits that are coming through with the necessary skills. And we've identified, large gaps in that educational provision as students come through the system. So that's part of the problem that we need to sort of fix that educational gap. But as both Melanie and Gordon have said, the issue is a cultural within an organization, first and foremost. And until we get the culture of acceptance, taking on board the need to move to information management, to sort of engage at all levels, and to make sure that everybody in an organization understands that and is on board with that, and knows what that means, then and only then can we start to sort of move forwards and kind of make any progress. But and certainly I think there is the issue that we've already alluded to, the fact that BIM has been how we've led to this point. But BIM for FM, BIM is so far down the line of the IM journey. Procuring BIM on a project means that you should already have so many processes and things embedded within your organization. It should already be business as usual within your organization in terms of what you're going to use the data for, how you're going to sort of rationalize that information, how you're going to make sure that it works for you and it works to its full financial capability. And that's what I meant earlier on about the questions. It's only once you've got that embedded, can you then sit at the table with a BIM procurement hat on and say, right, this is what I want, this is how I want it delivered, and this is how you will give it to me. And so I think too many people go at it from the wrong end of the stick, and they kind of arrive at this point because of a BIM project being forced on them and because they've felt it was the right way to go. And then they're trying to reverse engineer their systems in order to fit this data in that's not to your specification, it's to somebody else's, that's asked the wrong questions.
So it's really tailoring that approach and embedding that cultural change that is people led. You touched there on about asking the right questions, and again, whoever on the panel would like to jump in on this or the previous question, a comment here from someone asking what are the right questions and how they can leverage a digital transformation. I would say cultural transformation to capture and improve. So, any thoughts on that, panelists?
Weigh in on that. I mean, one thing I would say, and just before I get into this, is really pleased to see the amount of questions flowing through on this session. I'll take them back to the technology special interest group, and we'll make sure from an IWFM point of view, everyone gets an answer because we are probably not going to get through it all, I would imagine now. So really great, everyone. It's always better when we're answering your questions rather than having to make up our own. Um, so there's a thing, and it's a free thing, which is always nice, from the Government Industry Interoperability Group, which is a part of NEMA, that you can search for on Google called the Standard Information Approach. And the whole concept of it is about kind of getting in alignment the questions to ask to start, in essence, your IM journey. So how do you start to get those ducks in a row? Because it's not one question, is it? That's half our battle as facility managers. There's so many questions, that getting them in the right order because you can't answer all of them either. So what's the things that are gonna, for me, with any client, I'll at the very beginning, once I've assessed, as I said earlier on, got that baseline, I'll want to speak to the SLT and I'll want to understand quick wins, big gains, big risks. I don't think you need to go beyond those three. On your journey, you'll go down the rabbit hole and you'll have hundreds of questions with information purposes, models, requirements. You'll have a lot of documented stuff, systems. Fine. But right here, right now, you want the CFO to be running to you with open arms because your first three projects have knocked it out of the park. So that's typically going to be something that changes the dial. So it's either going to improve people's experience of your workplaces. As I say, it's going to de-risk, you know, fire assessments or, whatever it happens to be, security considerations, energy. So that's I'm I'm not saying that, I'm a big advocate of holistic whole life cycle facility management thinking, and that needs m many questions. But like I said earlier on, start small, think big, scale fast, and to do such, you need momentum. And therefore, the questions to ask are the things that are going to get people's attention invariably. We know our HVAC systems and our lighting consume most of our energy. We have these kind of budgets. So we have these starters for 10 of, what's the thing that I can do that moves 2 or 3% off the bottom line, then people are paying attention. So that would be my recommendation for how to go about it. But then go through the whole rigor of the likes of 19650. We've got BS 8536, which is a British standard that supports 19650. There's the NEMA work. We've got the Information Management Initiative and the rules and principles that have been published there. So some of these are behind paywalls, but a lot of this resource I'm highlighting is free. And things like the Technology Special Interest Group. The Institute's here to help you. So, we're here to help answer some of these questions. So if they're not all covered, like I said, on this call, don't wait for the next webinar. Start engaging with us. We're looking for a new run of members right now. So kind of get involved and start being part of the answer rather than the questions. We need help.
Great call to action there. Melanie, Paul, do you have anything to add to that response?
Just very quickly, I think, just sort of in response to that question, and also something that Timothy Coots has brought up about information overload. I think in terms of the questions that we're asking is as Gordon said, the questions are there for in terms of what information you can use and what information you're receiving. The ISO 9650 is very clear in terms of the level of information provided through the framework. And it is that there is a minimum requirement for information that you ask your supply chain for. And when it's the further clarity that goes on from that point says that, okay, anything above the minimum is not right. So it's not really a minimum. This is exactly what I want. Don't give me everything because you're too lazy to sort out between what I've asked for and what you have, and you just think you'll dump everything on me. Specifically say what you want, and then, don't put up with receiving everything that's unfiltered. Because as Gordon said, if you start trying to apply that to AI, it'll start adding all sorts of lies and filling gaps in between. So you've got to be able to have systems in place that can take the information in a properly structured way, that arrives in the format that you require it. And they're sort of some of the fundamental questions that you'd be putting on the BIM team. And therefore, they are the questions that really you should be looking internally at and saying, what is it that I can use? What are those low-hanging fruit that are going to give me immediate benefits and financial returns with the minimum of effort?
Can I just jump in there as well, please? I think it's as well, who is this information for? Because oftentimes you can carve information, the same set of information up into different ways in order to provide it to different people or different organizations. And I think that's really quite critical. I mean, if I put my BIM hat on, it's something we've kind of come full circle on with BIM execution plans and exchange information requirements, where at some point in time they were coming up to 150 pages each. And then we realized nobody's reading it. Nobody really cares what's on page 2, let alone page 149. So what is the critical information that these people need to know? And who are the people that do need to know the details and will need to reference the encyclopedia of BIM information on a project? So it's also about thinking at that level as well, is that information isn't just for one person. It's actually for a multitude of people to meet multiple different purposes. And it comes back to, again, that's a good question for me, is how that's answered and how information is structured accordingly.
Thank you very much, Melanie. I think a common theme through a lot of the questions that is coming in is about that sort of overwhelm and kind of where to start, eating the elephant, as Gordon put it, quite yeah, that really does paint a picture of the size of the problem, and I guess that's especially prevalent in small and micro businesses. So, as we start to draw the session to a close, and apologies if we haven't come to your question, we will get back to you with it. We could have easily done a whole afternoon session on this, and maybe we will in the future. But certainly, it would be good to come to each panelist and say, for someone who is in that rabbit in the headlights, that overwhelm moment, they possibly haven't got the resource of a larger organization. What's the one takeaway from today, apart from guidance or engage with Paul, that you think would be useful for them to take away? And just Melanie, so I'll give you a moment to think. I could come to Gordon with that.
So Andrew, I mean, one of the big things that I see missing, and I think it basically heavily undermines the value proposition of FM, is the connect between the strategic goals and your own information. So, it's a bit like what Melanie just said there. You've got different audiences that your information's for. So you've got asset efficiency, or absentee numbers, or whatever it might be that you look at from an FM operational point of view. But you're given your budget from the board. So if you can't in turn talk their language, I mean, certainly at scale anyway, most boards will have some sort of, I mean, even micro businesses have some plan of what they want to do in life. So, and that's where ISO 19650 has its kind of workflow of mapping things like organization information requirements, information purposes, mapping them all the way through to ultimately the end point. So your assets, or, what your places, spaces. We've just started a new British standard on facility management information management, which will extend out the work from 19650. So that would be my kind of critical get to that point first. I mean, it's on the far right left hand side of the workflow anyway for that exact reason. But you want to then be able to talk your world in their language, because that's how you maintain or increase or keep safe your budgets basically.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gordon. Yeah, and very much that all of the change management skills that we have, and the sort of human skills we have around that. Paul, is there any what sort of one key takeaway would you like to give to that overwhelmed person who's really wanting to engage with this but just can't see where to start?
I think if I was going to start anywhere, it would certainly be with the information management initiative, the IMI initiative is a very simple step-by-step approach to an introspective organizational readiness. It sort of poses the questions, it proposes some of the answers. So if you go to the NEMA website, you'll find a section on IMI, and in there you'll see some really baseline information that covers the people, the process, the standards, and really start to look at that internally and understand what it is you look to get out of this. And I think that's the key question: is what's your intention? What do you hope to look like in 3, 5, 10 years time from a digital perspective? And how do you start to make those movements? And I think in support of that, I'd say ISO 41000, sorry, yeah, 41001, in terms of that kind of, again, organizational readiness, asking those questions. So once you've kind of signed up to the IMI and the principles involved in that, then the next more granular step would be 41001 to really start digging in and preparing to have those conversations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. And I know we're throwing a lot of ISO standards and British standards at colleagues on the call today, but you will be relieved to know that these are referenced in the guidance and where they do align with the information management initiative and where they map into that people, process, data, technology, or context layer. Melanie, last by no means least, what would your one key takeaway from today be for those colleagues on the call who are really keen to engage but just not quite sure where to start?
Sure, look, I think a lot of ground's been covered, but I appreciate it's also a really, really big topic. One thing I would say is just to go back to, we've thrown a lot of terminology around purpose, around questions, etc. But I really do believe that I think if you link it to what decisions need to be made within the business surrounding workplace and facilities management, I think that's an excellent starting point. And as I say, doing that spring clean of your information, take an information asset register will certainly help go to partly towards where you need to go to meet those decisions. So just creating a little bit of a framework for yourself, and then ultimately the rest of it should follow. But I hope that's helpful advice.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you so much to everyone who's submitted questions. We've had so many, and it's really, as Gordon has said, really heartening when those questions come in. We will get back to you with a response. I know there's quite a few we sort of haven't covered directly, and there's a lot of people in the questions making connections across domains as well, which I think is a really good start. And very much in the spirit of this information management good practice guide. There is a QR code on the screen there, should you have a mobile device near you to be able to link to that. It is also available to IWFM members free of charge on the IWFM website. And it covers very much what we've talked about today. We focus very much on the sort of the starting the process, that spring cleaning, that communicating the benefits of a joined up approach to decision makers within the business. But the guidance also goes into that people, that change management, that connecting standards, and that thoughts cross domain as well. So very much worth accessing and downloading there. And do get in touch. Let us know what you think of it as well. And a couple of call to actions as well from Paul and Gordon as well, if you are interested in engaging more widely with IWFM and the tech special interest group. I'm sure IWFM colleagues will be happy to share details in the follow-up there as well. Just a couple of other bits of housekeeping and advertorials while I have you here. We are currently conducting our Market Outlook survey. This is our annual sort of snapshot of the FM sector, both for members and non-members, really to take that pulse of the sector and see how we're doing. As Melanie outlined, it's January. We're doing our spring cleaning. We're starting our business. Well, we're already into our business plans. We're on week week 3 or 4 already. Goodness, it doesn't have time fly. And it's really an opportunity to take that pulse of the sector and be able to see what's happening, what the big pieces are, and how we can respond to that. Again, members should have had a link to that survey sent out, but there's a QR code there and it's linked from our website as well. The survey closes 16th of February, and we'd really appreciate you taking the few minutes it would take in order to do that. And also, should you be interested as well, reach out to Paul for that Project Falcon. The sort of final advertorial here is, goodness, October already we're thinking about. Perhaps some of you have some best practice in information management or other aspects of FM you want to shout about, you want to celebrate, and you want recognised. We're always looking for entries to our Impact Awards. In our Impact Awards 2026, the deadline is April. Enter now. There's all the information you need at IWFMawards.org. It's going to be at the Grosvenor House Hotel, London, and it will be lovely to see as many of you as possible there on the 8th of October. There is a CPD number for today's event. I think we will all agree it's been invaluable in helping unpack information management. I certainly feel like I know far more than I did an hour ago, and I certainly know where to start in asking those right questions within an organization and support that digital transformation and communicate that. So there is a CPD number there and another QR code. You can add that to that. I would like to thank my panelists, my excellent panelists, Paul Waddy, Melanie Robinson, and Gordon Mitchell for their contributions and thoughts today. Strikes me this is the start of a conversation. This is not going to be a one and done deal. And I know we've made many references to AI and machine learning today, and that is something the Institute is keen to explore some future guidance on as well. So I imagine we will be, once that is in train and released, there will be a similar session to this where we can pick up some of the themes we've talked about today. Thank you very much for your questions, everyone. We are now just before 1 p.m. and thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thanks for
Andrew, can I just add on just a
yeah,
final little piece here?
you do.
We've spoken around maturity, and Paul mentioned 41001. You for IWFM members, the Digital Maturity Good Practice Guide is also a resource you can use, and it maps the ISO 41001 to the IWFM Professional Standards Framework. So there's a lot of guidance in that document which I also authored. So they're both wrote in a way that they can probably be leveraged together and give you some springboards into trying to wrestle your information management future in landscapes. So just another doc that might play into helping you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gordon. No, that's really helpful and hopefully an additional resource for members and non-members to access there as well. Thank you very much all. We'll draw the webinar to a close and have a great day. Cheers now.